Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Looking forward to being with you today. It's our last class. I'm a little sad. I'm going to miss you guys. But I am grateful that you guys are here and that you made it to the final course. And lucky for you, we are going to be talking about something really cool and useful today, primarily table views. Okay, so most apps that you've used, if not all apps besides games, contain some form of a table view. Okay, and so for our class today, we want to talk about table views and help you kind of get a basic sense and feeling of how they work and when we're actually going to create a table view app today. Okay, so hopefully everything went okay with the homework last night, and we'll be creating an app semi-similar, creating a contact app today. As far as this being the last day, remember, if you are interested in taking the full-time course, make sure to apply online for that. I just want to check, are any of you planning on taking the full-time course? Is there anybody here right now that's planning on taking the full-time course? Awesome. Cool. Looks like we have at least 4 of you, which is awesome. You guys are going to love it. And so by the end of today, you should be well prepared to take the entrance exam if you haven't already taken it. For those of you who are still thinking of the course, if you have any questions or just want to know more about it, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We also are going to be doing another Intro to iOS course that will start in a week. So the date of that will be on August 13th. This course will start over. So if some of you missed out on it or you feel like you need more preparation, feel free to take this course one more time. Also, all of the videos have been posted for this course. If you just want to watch those to prepare for the exam, you can do that as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with today. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, so today, like I said, we are going to be creating a table view app. Okay, and let me show you. I'm going to show you using the simulator of what this app is going to look like. Okay, so pretty basic table view app for contacts. And so you're going to have this primary table view here that's going to have a list of different contacts. And then you will also have the ability to tap on one of the rows and it will go into a new view controller that has the name of the contact. Okay, so I can go to Anna, I can go to Chris here. Okay, so pretty basic, but super important nonetheless. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started here. And I know some of you don't like seeing my face while we do this, so I'm going to stop my video here so that you can just hear my voice. Okay, so we're going to get started with an Xcode project today. So go ahead and launch Xcode. And if you already have it launched, then go to File, New, and then we're going to be doing a new project. Okay, so I'll bring this over here. Alrighty. And we are going to just choose single view application today. Okay? Single view application, and let's go ahead and call this contact. Lambda School. Okay, and my team name is going to be Lambda, or for you, it's probably going to be none because you don't have a developer account. And we're going to be using Swift today. Make sure you uncheck core data or any unit tests if they are checked. And let's go ahead and hit next here. And I will save this to my desktop. All right. Okay, so like always, we'll see just kind of our initial configuration for our project here, but we don't need to change anything. Let's go ahead and let's get started in our main.storyboard file. Okay, so usually when I work on a project, I like to create the visual interface first and then work on kind of the programmatic part of it. Okay, so we're going to get started in main.storyboard today. And let's pull up our application here again, or at least I'll pull it up, just so that we can get a feel of what we're building, okay? So again, looks like we have a table view that's going to be taking up my entire screen, and then we have just another view controller that has a name on it, okay? So let's talk about how we can configure this in our main.storyboard, okay? Well here, what has been given to us is just a view controller, okay? And so if we look at our list of objects here, if I start typing in table view, you can see that I have a table view object and a table view controller, okay? And today we're going to be working with this table view controller, because table view, you can drag this on and you can add it to a view controller. And so you've probably seen applications that, you know, maybe the top half is like a static image, and then the bottom half is a table view. So that's when you would want to use this view controller and then add a table view object to it, okay? So table view controller is primarily used when the entire screen is going to be your table view, okay? So let's go ahead and let's get rid of this cookie cutter, or with this view controller that was provided to us. Go ahead and delete that. Select that and delete that, okay? And because that's deleted, this view controller that was connected to it isn't connected to anything anymore either. So go ahead and delete that viewcontroller.swift file, because we're going to create our own file later. Okay, so right now you should just have your app delegate and main.storyboard, assets, launch screen storyboard, and info.plist. That's your files, okay? So here we are back in our main storyboard. Let's go ahead and drag this table view controller object onto our canvas here, okay? So this is a table view controller. And a table view controller, like I said, fills the entire screen. It's a table view that takes up the entire screen when you launch the app. Okay, and so there are a few different things that we can do to change the look of this table view controller. So if you have your table view controller selected and you're selected on this attributes inspector, you see that there are different attributes that you can set, you know, presentation, a few other things here, but we're probably not going to change much in here, okay? One thing that we do need to set though is we need to say that this is the initial view controller, okay? So when you launch your application, the application is going to ask, hey, what screen do I need to show first, okay? And so again, we want to show this table view first, so we're going to set it as the initial view controller here. So you can see that when I checked that, it put an arrow next to my table view controller. And again, that's just saying this is the entry point to the application, okay? So let's see what we have on our table view controller. Well, we have a few different objects. You can see that our main object here is a table view. And so when I click on the table view, it fills the entire screen. So the table view is constrained to my entire screen. And then there are a few things that we can change with my table view here, right? So we're going to be using dynamic prototypes because we want our table view to be dynamic according to how many contacts we have inside of our data source, right? And then you can also see that we can set different colors on our table view. If you want to set like a background color, if you want to set the color of the different cells, you can do that here, okay? Well, let's go one more step in and take a look at our table view cell. Okay, so here is where we can set a few different attributes on our table view cell. And this first one, this main one that I want you to look at is the style, okay? So the style, we can have a basic style, which you can see is just a very basic table view cell that has one label on it. We also have a right detail, which has two labels on it, one on the left and one on the right. We've got left detail, which has two labels, but kind of puts them over to the left. And we've got subtitle, which still has two labels. It has this main label and a detail label right underneath it, okay? So looking at our application here, it looks like we are just going to be sticking with the basic style, right? We just have one label. So let's go ahead and set our table view cell style to basic here, okay? Then we can go ahead and we can change this title, and I can go ahead and put my name here. Doesn't really matter because this is going to be changing anyway, but this just represents what our table view cell is going to look like, okay? So we have our table view controller. We have our cell. Let's go ahead and talk about other things that we may need to add. I think this is all that we'll need for our table view now, and I'm going to come back to the second view controller. But let's talk about how we can connect up our table view controller to code now, okay? So over here, we're just going to go ahead and press Command N, which means new file, or you can click on File, New, and File here, okay? So we are going to be selecting our file from this Cocoa Touch class, okay? Because we are adding a class file that's going to be of UI table view controller class, okay? So Swift file, remember, just kind of gives you a blank Swift file that you can add different properties and whatnot to. But this Cocoa Touch class will give us templates for different classes, right? So you can see here that the class, the name of my class, I'm going to set it to contact, and then this is going to be a contact table view controller, okay? And we want this to be a subclass. Remember we talked about subclassing yesterday of table view controller. So if I change the subclass here, you'll see that my class automatically adds on the table view controller suffix here, okay? Okay. So we just had a question, am I selecting from the right menu? No, we're creating a new file. So in Xcode, you're gonna go to File, New, File, and then you're gonna be selecting from Cocoa Touch class, okay? And then our class name is going to be Contact Table View Controller, and it's going to be a subclass of UI Table View Controller. And so remember, what's cool about subclassing is that we're going to get all of the attributes and properties and methods that are built into UI Table View Controller for free. Plus, we can add our own additional stuff in our custom class, right? So this is going to be Swift language. Let's go ahead and hit Next here and hit Create. Okay? And so now you can see that we have a new class, and it's called Contact Table View Controller, and it is a subclass of UI Table View Controller. And because it's a subclass of UI Table View Controller, you can see that there's all of this cool code included for us that we can either delete or that we can implement into our custom class of Contact Table View Controller, okay? So let's go ahead and let's clean this up a little bit and talk about the only things that we're going to need. So go ahead and clear out this code here inside of ViewDidLoad. Okay, let's get rid of the did receive memory warning because we don't need it to do anything with that. Okay, looks like we have a function here. And you can see that all of these functions are listed under this mark for table view data source, okay? So this is where the actual configuration for your table view happens. All of this stuff under table view data source. Okay, so this asks important questions like how many sections are in your table view? How many rows are there? What should the rows look like? Okay, how do you want to be able to edit the rows? Do you want to be able to delete them? Blah, 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 right? So The data source methods that we are going to need to use for our table view are the number of rows, right? So the number of sections isn't important because we're not splitting this up into sections. And the default for this is going to be one section. So I can go ahead and just get rid of that. Okay, so we do want to tell how many rows our table view is going to have. Okay, and go ahead and uncomment this next table view, or this next method here, which says cell for row at. Okay, so these two rows here, or these two methods, my apologies, are required data source methods. These require you, these are required to be included in your code, right? And so the rest of these that are commented out still, they aren't required. We can get away, our app can run just fine without any of them. But you always need to, A, tell the app how many rows your table view needs, and then B, what those rows need to look like, or what data they need to include, okay? So we're going to be using these two, but remember that we want more than just how many rows and what do the rows look like. We actually need to be able to select the row that will take us into a new screen, right? But at least for today, we actually aren't going to use the did select row at. Okay, so did select row at allows you to kind of configure what happens when you select each individual row, but we're not going to deal with that today. So go ahead and clear out all of this code up until you get to the point of navigation, okay? And I'm not going to uncomment that yet because we'll talk about that later, okay? So again, these data source methods are going to be telling our table view how many rows there are and what the rows should look like, okay? So now we've got our basic file for our table view, and we'll go in and we'll add some more code to this. But let's run back to our storyboard here. And you'll remember that when we started this Xcode project, we had our main.storyboard and we had viewController.swift, and those files were connected, right? And so we already knew that the view controller was connected to whatever in storyboard. But right now there is a gap and there is no connection between my table view controller here and my contact table view controller Swift file, okay? So what we need to do then is we need this table view controller here to be of class contact table view controller, right? So if you go ahead and make sure you select your table view controller here, and up here in our different inspectors or different menus, go ahead and click on this identity inspector, okay? So you can see that currently our table view controller is of class UI table view controller, which is good. It is a UI table view controller, but we want to connect it to our custom class, which was our contact table view controller. Okay, so if you start typing in contact table view controller, it should autocomplete for you and then press enter. Okay, so now our main.storyboard, this contact table view controller, is connected to this file. Okay, so now that those are connected, let's go ahead and go back to our table view controller here. And let's start filling out some of our data source methods, okay? So first off, we need a data source, okay? We need a place where all of these contacts are coming from. And for the purposes of this project, let's just go ahead and create like a literal data source. We'll do it by creating an array literal that's going to have a list of all of our different contacts, right? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and let's create an array of contacts. So we're going to do variable contact array is equal to, and then remember with arrays, we need to include them inside of these brackets. And let's go ahead and include a few contacts, okay? So I've got Johnny, let's include a few of you. Okay, so we've got me, we've got Andrew, Billy, Dante, Eric, Joe, and let's just do one more. Luis here. Okay. So here's a list of all of my different contacts. Okay, when we're going to say that this is our data source, it's pretty uncommon to have a literal data source right here in your table view controller, but for simplicity's sake, we're just going to have the array here that has all of our different contacts in it. Okay, so now I want all of these names to show up in a table view. Okay, well, let's go through our data source methods and see how we can get them into our table view. Okay, so our first data source method here for our table view is saying how many rows do you want in your table view. Okay, well, I could go and I could count and I could say, okay, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I've got 7 contacts, and I could return 7 and say that I need 7 rows in order to fit all of my contacts in. But obviously that's not the best way to do that, because what if we add contacts to our array, right? What if we create a new contact? Well, in that case, then we would just want to take the total count of names inside of our array. And that's really easy with one of the array methods that Apple has already given to us. So if I type in contact array here and do dot notation, you can see that we've got this method here that says count. And the count gives us the number of elements inside of a collection. Okay, so I'm going to return my contact array dot count. That's how many rows I want there to be. Okay, so however many items are inside of my array, I want that to be the number of rows that are inside of my table view. Okay, so we're all good. We're checked off. That's how we implement this first method of number of rows. Okay, has everybody caught up with me thus far? I'm happy to go back and review anything. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page before I move forward. Okay, somebody had a question about the arrow to select the first window. So if you jump back over into your main storyboard here, make sure that you select your contact table view controller. And then in the attributes inspector, which is just this little arrow here, make sure that you select is initial view controller. Okay, so check that, and that will put the arrow next to it. Okay, any other questions before we move on? All righty, cool. Let's go back to our contact table view controller, and let's talk about our next data source method. Okay, and this data source method, we usually refer to it by this cell for row at. Okay, so our data source method cell for row at, and this is essentially saying, what does the cell look like? What data needs to be included in each of the cells? Okay, so you can see here that they created a cell for us. So it says let cell equal table view DQ reusable cell. Okay, and what this means, this DQ reusable cell, is you probably didn't know this, but when you're looking at a table view, you probably think that if you were to open up the Contacts app right now, that it's already loaded with all of your contacts, right? You could just scroll on and all of those cells are already loaded. Well, obviously that would be really, that would be a lot of memory usage to load up the entire table view when really you can only see about 6 or 7 of those cells at a time, right? So what this DQ reusable cell is saying is that when is just that we want to reuse cells as they leave the screen, right? So when you're scrolling on the Contacts app, as soon as a cell leaves the screen, we're going to reuse it for our next contact. So as the new cell comes up from the bottom, we're reusing a cell that we've already scrolled through, right? And so it's going to ask here, and it's say you're going to be reusing a cell with an identifier, right? And so we need an identifier for what cell we want to reuse in our table view, okay? So if we open up our main.storyboard here, you can see that we already have a cell set up, remember, where we put our name. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at that cell. And we want to give it a specific reusable identifier, okay? So if you open up this side menu here, in the attributes inspector, you can see this section for identifier, and it says reuse identifier. So let's go ahead and let's give this identifier, give this a name for an identifier, and let's call it contact cell, okay? This is the cell that we want to reuse in our table view, okay? So now that that has an identifier, go ahead and copy that, because we want to make sure that we have the identifier exact between the two, right? And let's go ahead and paste that where it says reuse identifier, okay? So now we're saying that our cell is going to be the cell on our table view, right? On our table view on our main.storyboard, because we've given it the identifier of contact cell. So now it's going to reuse that for our table view, okay? So now we need to set the label on our table view to be the name, right? Because in our table view, in our list of contacts, we have the names of everybody, okay? So here's what we're going to do, is we need to create a contact object first, okay? So let's go ahead and say let contact be equal to, okay? And then remember we talked about subscript notation when we want to access elements outside of an array, okay? So I'm going to access my contacts array here, and we want to tell the table view what number it needs to select, okay? What index or what element from our array it needs to select. Okay, so if I did 0 here, then that would go through and it would select just Johnny and fill all of our table view cells with Johnny, okay? So that's not exactly what we want to select. We want to select the correct index for each item inside of my array. And you can see here that my table view data source method has given me an index path, okay? And so an index path, it has that word in it, index, right? It gives me a proper index for my table view, right? And so if I actually go here and I say index path dot row, okay, then that's going to give me the correct contact, right? Because remember, we're setting up our 7 rows with 7 names, and so I want the contact to be equal to the row, okay? So our first row is going to have an index path row of 0, okay? So if I pass that index path.row into here, that's going to grab Johnny outside of my array, okay? And then as we set up our next cell for row number 2, it's going to have an index path of 1, and index path row is equal to 1. It's going to put Andrew inside of that next row, okay? And so on and so forth through Billy, Dante, Eric, Joe, and Luis, right? So that is how we create our contact object using subscript notation. So we have our contacts array, and we want to access the number in our array, or the index in our array, which is going to be equal to index path.row. Okay? Is everyone with me thus far? I want to make sure that this is clear. Okay. Looks like we are all good. Okay, so now that we have a contact object, I can go ahead and we can take the name from that and put it on our cell, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and call my cell here that's already been created, and using dot syntax, you can see all of the different properties that my cell has, okay? So it has a content view, it has a detailed text label, and if I start typing in title, or not title, sorry, just text label, I can access the text label inside of my cell, okay? And so we have the text label, and you can see that there's a detailed text label. Well, remember over here in Storyboard, my cell is of basic type, which means that it only has a text label, okay? If I did like write detail, then this is my text label, the Johnny is my text label, and the detail label is my detail text label, right? But we're just doing a basic cell type. So I just need to access the text label property on my cell. And then I'm going to say cell.textlabel.text is equal to my contact, okay? So whatever my contact is equal to, which it could be Johnny, it could be Andrew, it could be Billy, set the text label on my cell to that contact, okay? Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and let's run it and see where we're at. Okay, so I'm gonna do this on the iPhone 10. I'm gonna hit play here. Okay, and drag this over, and we see that we have a table view that has a row for each of my contacts. Okay, Johnny, Andrew, Billy, Dante, Eric, Joe, and Lewis. Okay, is everybody with me thus far? Did that work out for everybody? Awesome. Great job, guys. Okay, so we're not quite done yet though, because remember in our other project, we wanted to be able to click on the row and have it go to a new view, okay? And right now it's not doing anything when I click on these, okay? Or when you tap on them, right? So let's go ahead and let's start setting up our view controller, okay? Because remember we have one table view controller and one view controller. So let's hop back over into main.storyboard here. And I want to drag a UI view controller in here. So let's do view controller and go ahead and drag that right next to our table view. Okay. And let's go ahead and we want to just have a name here. So we're going to drag in a UI label into our view controller. And then let's go ahead and give this constraints, okay? So I'm going to constrain it or pin it to the top left and right with constraints of 8 points. Okay, so 8 points away from the leading, trailing, and top edge of my screen. Okay? So then I'll go ahead and we'll click on Add 3 Constraints here. And now we've got our label here, which I would expect to say Johnny or whatever name we pass in, okay? All right, so I've got my view controller and I've got my table view controller here on my storyboard, okay? So let's go ahead and talk about how we can make somebody tapping on this table view row go to our view controller, okay? So this is something that's called a segue. Yep, Dante got it right. So we are creating a segue, which is essentially telling our application when the user interacts with this element, go to this view controller, okay? So to create a segue, I'm going to click on my contact cell here, and I'm going to control drag over to my view controller, okay? Control drag over to our view controller. So just like you've done with outlets and IB actions in the past, control drag but we're control dragging from our contact cell into our view controller, okay? And when you do that, you'll see that we have different segues, right? So we've got a show segue, we've got a present modally, okay? So a show segue is probably one that you've seen most often, where a new view slides in from the right side, okay? And so for this application, we are just going to be doing a show segue, okay? So now as soon as we do that, you can see that there's a connection in between our table view controller and our detail view controller, right? Okay. Our detail view controller being the view controller that has our name, okay? And so if you click on this, you can see that it is a show segue, okay? And the segue happens when we tap on our cell, okay? All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and run our code and see where we're at. Okay, so I'll go ahead and we'll tap on this, and you can see that that it says Johnny, okay? Even though I didn't click on the right thing. And then I also have no way to get back, right? There's no way for me to navigate back, so I'd have to relaunch my app. Okay, so we're missing a few pieces here. Okay, so something super, super nice. Oh, let's see. I have a question here. Can I repeat the process one more time of creating a segue? Is that what you're asking, Michelle? You just want to see me create a segue one more time? Okay, cool. Let me go ahead and delete our segue here. Okay, so to create a segue, make sure you select your table view cell. Okay, so I'm on my contact cell right now. And you're going to control drag over to your view controller. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and do a show segue here. Okay. So now we've got that segue in play. So when a user taps on my cell, it's going to segue to this new view controller. Okay. But remember, when I launched this, it was I selected a row that wasn't Johnny, and it's still saying Johnny. Okay, so that's wrong. And there was no way for me to get back to my table view. Okay, so something super, super nice that Apple has provided is something called a navigation controller. Okay, and so a navigation controller is what provides those, those back buttons for us that help us go back to a previous view controller. Okay, so go ahead and select your table view controller here, and we're going to go up to editor. Okay, so select your table view controller, go up to editor in your Xcode settings, and you're going to go down to this embed in. Okay, and we are going to embed this into a navigation controller. Okay, and so the navigation controller, you can see here, has added a back button for us on this view controller. Okay, so now we can go back to the previous table view controller. Okay, so these navigation controllers, they're awesome because they essentially help us to navigate in between our different screens. Okay, and so they give us kind of more sense of our location in a given stack. Okay, so let's go ahead, and now that we're embedded inside of a navigation controller, let's run our app again. And you'll see here that now we've got this top bar, and so this top bar is part of our navigation controller. This is a navigation bar, because the navigation controller uses this bar to add any sort of navigation buttons that we may need, right? So if I tap on Johnny here, you can see that now we have a back button, and I can go back to my table view controller, okay? And so that's all made possible by our navigation controller, okay? It allows us to navigate back and forth between these two views, okay? So let's go ahead and let's add a little bit more detail to this. So in my navigation bar here, You can give this navigation, or you can give this view controller a title. Okay, so let's just call it contacts. Okay, so if you click on your navigation bar up here, up top, above your table view rows, you can set a title. Okay, so I just set this to contacts. Okay, and if you actually select on your navigation controller, there is a cool thing you can do. If I select on my navigation bar, I'm going to say prefers large titles. Okay, so this is on my navigation controller. If I select the navigation bar, I'll select prefers large titles. You can see that now our contacts is humongous, right? And so that's pretty similar to what you'll see on the contacts app on your iPhone already. Okay, so we've got our contacts here. And so if we run our project again, you can see the changes that we made. So now we've got contacts, and I can select this, and we can go back and forth, okay? Let's go ahead and let's give this navigation bar a title, right? And so you can see when you try selecting here on your detail view controller that you can't select any navigation bar. And that is because we need to add a navigation bar to it, okay? So go ahead and search for navigation bar and drag that onto here. Oh, actually, I lie. Navigation item, okay? So you can see navigation item represents a state of the navigation bar, including a title. Okay, so just drag that navigation item onto your view controller. So then we have a navigation item that we can give a title to, and I'm going to say detail for contact or something like that, okay? So we've got contacts and detail for contact. Okay, is everyone with me thus far? Is anybody lost? Okay, I'll take your silence as a we are all caught up. Okay, so now that we've got our navigation controller set up and we can navigate between our contacts and our detail view controller, we need a way to pass some information between the two, right? Because this is still saying Johnny, no matter what row I actually select, okay? So let's go ahead, and we need to give this a new class, right? Because right now this doesn't have any code associated with it. It's just a static storyboard that's never going to change unless we actually write some code on it, okay? So over here in our project navigator again, go ahead and hit Command New, and we are going to be creating another Cocoa Touch class, but this is going to be just a UI view controller, right? Not a table view controller. So just UI view controller. And let's call it contact detail view controller. Okay, so we'll hit next here, we'll hit create, and now you can see that we've got our contact detail view controller, a new class, okay? So first things first, in my storyboard, I want to set my contact detail view controller, my view controller here, to be of that class, which I do in the identity inspector. I'm going to set the class to contact detail view controller, okay? So now this storyboard here has this view controller in my storyboard now is connected to a class, okay? And because it's connected to a class, we can drag in outlets, we can do IB actions, and we can actually do things programmatically, okay? So let's go ahead and open these up side by side. Okay, so I'm going to open up my contact detail view controller here, and then using the assistant editor, these Olympic rings here, I want to pull up my storyboard, my main.storyboard here. Okay, So now I've got my main.storyboard side by side with my contact detail view controller. Okay. Well, let's clean up some of the code here. Okay, we're not going to need anything with navigation, and we don't need anything with this did receive memory warning. Okay, but we need to create an outlet from my label here, right? Because we want this label to be dynamic and to have the contact name. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's drag an outlet over into our contact detail view controller. Okay, and I'm going to call this contact label. That's the name of my outlet. And we'll click connect here. And so now we have an outlet to our contact label. Okay, so the question is now, how are we going to pass data between our table view controller and pass that name into our detail view controller? Okay, so first off, we're going to need a contact property inside of our contact detail view controller, right? So let's go ahead and let's create a variable contact. And our contact, remember, is of type string. Okay? And let's go ahead and saying that you have an initialized contact, it doesn't equal anything. Well, in ViewDidLoad, we want our contact label dot text to be equal to our contacts, right? So contact label dot text be equal to whatever contact we pass in. Okay, and I can give contact an initial value of just an empty string. Okay. So contact label.text is going to be equal to contacts. Or we could say, so that I don't have to do an empty string, let's just make contact an optional. Okay. So contact label.text is going to be equal to contact. Okay. All right, so this is all the code that we're going to need for our contact view controller. Okay, so we created a contact property because we're going to need one of our contacts, right? And then I created an outlet to my contacts label. And then as soon as the screen loads, I want my contact label.text to be equal to whatever the contact is that I pass over to it. Okay, so last step. How do we pass the contact over? How do we pass the contact over from the table view controller to the, or from the table view controller to the detail view controller? Okay, well, let's go back over to our table view controller because this is where it all starts, right? And let's look at our code. You can see that we have this mark navigation here. Okay, mark navigation. So this is awesome because we do need to use some code for navigation. Okay, so I'm going to uncomment that. And you can see that the name of this function is prepare for segue. Okay, and so remember that we created a segue on our storyboard between the table view controller and the view controller. Okay, so anytime in your application, when you tap on something that is going to segue to another view, it's always going to call this prepare for segue. And so this is really nice because it allows us to prepare for the segue. Okay, what information do we need to pass before the segue actually takes place? Okay, so that code is going to be done here in the prepare for segue. Okay, so first off, we need to make sure that we are calling the right segue, or that we're using the right segue. And to do that, we need to give our segue an identifier. Okay, so go back to your main.storyboard and click on your segue here. And in the attributes inspector, let's give this segue an identifier. And let's call it show detail. Okay, that's the identifier for my segue. Okay, so heading back over to our contact table view controller, let's create a conditional. Okay, because we only want this to happen if the segue that's being called is the segue that we created. So let's say if our segue dot identifier is equal to, and then go ahead and put in the identifier that you created, show detail. If the segue dot identifier is equal to show detail, then what? Okay, well, we want to first make sure that our destination is our detail view controller, right? So we're making sure that, one, the segue identifier show detail, but then we also need to make sure that the destination is our detail view controller, okay? So here I'm going to do a guard, say guard let detail view controller be equal to segue dot destination, okay? And then this is something that we haven't learned yet, but we're going to cast this as our contact detail view controller, okay? So now we know we're casting our detail VC as a contact detail view controller, okay? So our detail VC is a contact detail view controller, okay? And I also want to guard on my index path and say let index path be equal to table view dot index path for selected row, okay? So remember, we want to pass the contact over that was the contact that was selected, right? And so the way that we can get the index path for that contact is by calling table view dot index path for selected row, okay? So we're guarding on these two things, so I need to do else return, okay? So if these things aren't true, or if they're nil, then don't do anything, right? So if segue dot identifier is equal to show detail, guard let my detail view controller equal segue dot destination as contact detail view controller, and let index path equal table view dot index path for selected row. Okay? Now that we've got an index path and our detail view controller, I can call my detail view controller, and because I have an instance of my detail view controller class, I have access to all of its properties. Well, if we go back and look at our contact detail view controller, you can see that we have a property on there called contact, which is perfect because I want to pass my contact from my table view controller over to my detail view controller. So I'm going to say detail view controller dot contact is equal to, and then we want to use subscript notation, contacts array index path dot row. Okay? So remember, my index path is whatever the user selected, whatever table view cell the user selected. Okay, so if I select the third row, my index path is going to be 2, right? And so then this is calling and it's saying, okay, go look at my contacts array and look at index 2. Okay, so let's go look at index 2. 0, 1, 2, Billy. Okay, so if I select Billy on my table view controller, which is index path 2, well, it's going to set my detail view controller dot contact equal to Billy, equal to whatever I select. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it and see what we get. Okay, so we've got our contacts here. Let's select Johnny equals Johnny. Well, it was always doing that, so we don't know if it works there. Well, let's select Andrew. Okay, looks like it passed Andrew through to our detail view controller. Okay, Billy, Dante, Joe. Okay, so recap. The prepare for segue is used every time that we are performing a segue. Okay, we're preparing for the segue, and we want to run code that passes information from one view controller to another between the segues, right? So we're going to first make sure that our segue identifier is show detail, okay? And if that's true, then we want to create an instance of detailed view controller coming from our segue destination, okay? And then we want to create an index path from our table view index path for selected row. And once we have those two things, then I can call my detail view controller.contact is equal to my contacts array index path.row. And now our app is fully functional. Okay, Billy, Joe, Luis. Okay. All right, guys. So that is everything for this project. Okay. And I know that we're getting close to our time, right? We've got about 4 minutes. But I want to make sure that we're all caught up before we sign off today. Okay, I want to make sure that everything is clear. So for those of you who are finished and are caught up and have no questions, let me go ahead and post the homework here for you. Let's see here. So the homework is going to be Swift vocabulary. It's going to look something like this. So you can see it's pretty similar. You're going to have Swift vocabulary, and when you tap on the cell, it's going to give you the vocab word as well as the definition. Okay? So that is the homework for tonight. And let me share the link here, as well as in Slack. Channel. Okay. All right, so I just sent that link out. That's the homework for tonight. So for those of you who are finished and don't have any questions, feel free to start working on the homework. And again, if you have any questions or concerns, let me know. If you're interested in signing up for the full course, you can apply online. But let me just say that before you guys leave, that it has been a pleasure to be able to teach all of you something that I love so much. It's kind of silly, but I really do love programming. It is so fun to be able to create applications and to learn new things each day. I'm still learning things as a developer every day. And so it's fun to get to learn new things and to solve new problems. And, you know, especially at the company that I'm working at, we're pushing out a new version 3.0 of our application, and there are so many changes, and there are different visual things that we need to change. There are bugs that we need to fix. And so every day is a new challenge, and it's a new opportunity to develop my skills. And that's why I love programming. And so I hope all of you kind of got a sense for that throughout this course of how cool it is to be a programmer. And I'd highly recommend taking the Lambda full-time course so that you can become a programmer and work on learning new things and becoming a better you. Because I am definitely a better person now than I was because of becoming a developer. So thank you very much to everyone for taking this course. And if you need to retake it or you want to retake it, again, we're starting one, not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. Okay? So that's all that we have for the course today. And I'm happy to stay on Zoom for any of you who have questions. Okay, and if we don't have any questions, then that's fine. But I just want to make sure that we're all caught up, that everyone is clear to how these table views work. Okay. Any questions? Any questions at all? Okay, so Dante. Dante had a question about, right before I went to navigation, can you ask a more specific question? Let's see, somebody got an error. I'm sorry if I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Egar? I probably totally butchered that. Egar? Cool. The error you got is a yellow error, and it says auto layout localization. Trailing constraint is missing, which may cause overlapping with other views. Okay, so if you go over to your main.storyboard here, I'm guessing it's on your label here, on your contact label. So make sure that you add a trailing constraint to this label, okay? And the way that you do that, remember, is by selecting this little TIE fighter down here that says add new constraints, and make sure that you give it a trailing constraint, which is the right constraint here, okay? So give that a constraint and then see if that error goes away, okay? Dante, how can we give a trailing constraint? So yeah, so to give it a trailing constraint, select on your contact label here, then select on the Add New Constraints button right here, and then you're going to click on this right constraint here, right? So you see this box here, and you can select the lines around it. Click on only the right box and give it a constraint. You can give it like a constraint of 8 points, is fine. And then go ahead and click Add One Constraint. And that should give you your trailing constraint that you're missing. Okay, so Dante, you have questions about the segue? So you need me to go back to that code so you can see it? How did I select the custom class for contact details? Okay, so from our contact detail view, or our main.storyboard, if you select on your view controller here and go to the identity inspector, okay, kind of looks like a little newspaper icon, you can set the class for it right there. Okay, so contact detail view controller. Okay, and then over in our table view controller, we have our prepare for segue, which again is called before we segue to our new view controller. It's how we make preparations, okay? And so we're gonna say if our segue.identifier is equal to show detail, so you should have given your segue an identifier, okay? Then guard let the detail view controller equal segue.destination as contact detail view controller, okay? And then let index path equal table view dot index path for selected row, else return. Okay, and then detail view controller dot contact is equal to your contacts array index path dot row. Okay, any specific questions about this prepare for segue? So the name of the segue, if you're back in your main.storyboard, select your segue here, and in the attributes inspector, you can give it an identifier. Okay, I just gave mine an identifier of show detail. Okay, and so then back in our table view controller, that's going to be our identifier, right? So we're going to write a conditional statement. If our identifier is show detail, then do what? Okay, and segue.destination is optional, and so that's why we need to use this guard let, which is a way of unwrapping our destination view controller, right? So we're just saying, okay, let my detail view controller equal unwrap my segue destination and cast it as a contact detail view controller. Okay, set it equal to a contact detail view controller class. Okay, and the reason that we want to do that is because we want to be able to access all of the properties inside of our contact detail view controller. Okay, so we cast it as a contact detail view controller so that we can access the properties within, which we had a contact property, that we needed to set, right? So detail view controller.contact is equal to, and then we're going to use subscript notation to set that contact equal to whatever contact we selected in our table view. Okay. Any other questions before we sign off today, guys? Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's sign off. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to the PMs. I know that this is the last day of class, but you guys still have your group meetings with your PMs. So make sure to come back in about 45 minutes or so whenever Boomer has those meetings. And you guys can go through the project together and ask him any questions, or feel free to Slack any of us in the meantime. Okay? Thank you so much for your time, guys, and best of luck as you take on the full-time course, all right? You guys have a good night.